Welcome, folks, to the IIoT World Industrial Metaverse Day. And thank you for joining us today. This is our first Industrial Metaverse Day. My name is Kevin O'Donovan. I'm the co-host for today, along with Lucian from IIoT World. And just to set the scene for today, before we start off into our first session, it's probably about 18 months ago, I was chatting with Lucian and we were chatting about the metaverse and what would it be or what could it be. And we kind of discussed that whatever it turns out to be, a lot of industry and enterprise customers were using a lot of what we would call the foundational building blocks. Everybody's putting in IoT solutions, gathering data, using AI to create predictive models, predictive maintenance. They were creating digital twins. We had digital twins from building designs. We had people doing brownfield LiDAR scans and drones, creating digital twins. And for many years, we've had people using VR for training, using augmented reality for remote worker support. And we've seen a lot of these technologies accelerate over the past 2 years because of the COVID lockdown. So to cut a long story short, we were kind of going, you know, we don't know what the industrial metaverse or the metaverse will turn out to be, or what we will actually call it. But we just saw that a lot of companies were starting to use these technologies and they were starting to come together in a way that we saw that, you know, this is going to turn into something different. It's the next generation of digitalization. It's the next evolution towards some sort of a metaverse. So, and here we are today. Now, over the course of the next 5 hours, we have 5 great sessions. We're starting off with what is the industrial metaverse and why is it important, sponsored by Dark Pulse. We follow on with Will the Industrial Metaverse Disrupt the Global Industry, sponsored by GE Digital. Our third session is Include the Industrial Metaverse Features in Your Existing IoT Platform, sponsored by Ursula Leo. Then we have The Industrial Metaverse is Built on a Strong Data Fabric, sponsored by Hitachi Vantara. And the last session of the day, Pervasive Compute Everywhere, Industrial Metaverse at the Edge and in the Cloud, sponsored by Intel. So we're going to hear a lot of different opinions, different ideas, and different food for thought as to what this industrial metaverse may turn out to be and what folks are doing today and where do we see it all going in the future. I'll be back with Lucian at the end in 5 hours time and we'll be doing a quick wrap up, but it's going to be a pretty fascinating day. So with that, we're going to start off with our first session. So we'll start off with a video and then Mark Sage will take over. Talk to you later.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Sage, and I'm the Executive Director of the AREA, which stands for Augmented Reality Enterprise Alliance. And I'm really excited and honored to be moderating the first panel today. And we will be asking the question with some real experts on what is the industrial metaverse and why it's important. But before we get into and I introduce some of the experts on the panel, just want to make sure you can familiarize yourself with the webinar tool. Please take a look around and use the kind of chat facility to say hello and where you're located and things like that. It's always interesting to see people around the world. But I'd also ask that you post your questions, but please put that in the Q&A tool, not the chat tool. It'll make it much easier for us to pick them up and find out, and I can ask the experts to answer them as well. So please, as a reminder, at any time, put your questions in the Q&A tool. There's some other events coming up from the IoT team, which includes the Analytics on the Edge in November the 16th and the IIoT World Manufacturing and Supply Chain Day on December the 7th. Just to be clear on the question side, we'll be probably doing those towards the end. And it's wouldn't be possible to run these kind of conferences without the sponsors. So again, thank you for Dark Pulse, GE Digital, Intel, Hitachi, Batara, Ursuleo, and Siemens as well. And then finally, before we actually get going, just a little bit about IIoT World. It's a leading authority in industrial IoT. IIoT World is a digital media outlet bringing the latest industrial Internet of Things virtual conferences and content to a global community of 279,000 plus decision makers and influencers, focus on delivering daily insights on the industrial Internet of Things across multiple verticals. Online, they curate a series of virtual events that draw thousands of delegates. So it's a really useful tool and outlet that I've been lucky enough to support for a number of years. Okay, so let's get into it. What is industrial metaverse and why it's important? What a question, eh? And I think in Kevin's introduction, it's maybe not clear. I'm certainly looking forward to finding out what our experts think, and I'm sure you are as well. So I'm going to introduce, the experts will introduce themselves very quickly, but we're going to basically ask in about 3 or 4 key questions. The first one I'm going to tax them on is what is the industrial metaverse from their perspective and why is it important? Basically the title of the panel. But then I'd like to really get into what real problems are and can be solved, so the use cases and how have they and their companies and how do you get started? I'd like to ask them about the benefits of deploying the metaverse and immersive technology and what barriers they need to overcome. What I'm also really excited about is our panel today are a combination of companies that are deploying the technology. We have hardware providers, as in AR hardware providers, we have system integrators, we have software providers, we have everything in between. So I think it's a really great range of experts that I'm sure will have views that are the same, but also potentially views that are not the same. And that's the whole point of our discussion, but also the opportunity for you to ask questions as well. So what I'm going to do to start with is ask them to introduce themselves and their role in their company as well. So if I can start, please, with Yum-Fu from Rokid.
Hey, thank you, Mark. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Maybe good evening, even depends where you are in this small global world. My name is Jung Fu. I service as the VP DGM for our global business of Rokid. Rokid is a Series C, total funding 450 million startup specialized in bringing empower frontline workers with true AR technology. And our vision is to leave nobody behind. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to have a good discussion with the folks here.
Fantastic, thank you. Like that to hand over to Annika.
Yeah, hi, I'm Annika from Siemens, and we have everything you just mentioned. So from hardware to software, everything that is needed to build the industrial metaverse. I'm the head of technology and innovation management. That means 3 things. I'm responsible for foresighting. So what are the next big technology trends that come to us? Second, the strategy for Siemens technology, meaning I'm really responsible for driving the technology portfolio, our so-called company core technologies. And third, being responsible for open innovation so that Siemens will stay innovative, but also that we open up to partners and build the metaverse together.
Fantastic, and welcome, Annika. Now, hand over to Hendrik.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yes, I'm Hendrik. I'm Chief Product Officer of TeamViewer. Obviously, in that role, taking oversight of the entire product portfolio of TeamViewer. That being said, I think it's worth mentioning that when you hear and think about TeamViewer, TeamViewer as of today is a lot more than what you probably all know TeamViewer for, which is remoting into any type of computer or system. Today, TeamViewer is doing a lot more, in particular also in the metaverse space, and I'm looking forward really to the discussion here around metaverse.
Fantastic, thank you, Henrik. Rune.
Yeah, thanks to everybody that's online and wanted to listen into what was there. I had the visualization center inside of Hexagon, as well as where we are focusing on core visualization technologies and being the center of excellence for extended reality. So and for those that doesn't know Hexagon, it's one of those companies that tends to have the real truth of the world, because we tend to measure or capture data around all the aspects of what we call the smart digital reality. So roughly between 70 and 80% of all cars, smartphones, airplanes manufactured has been touched with technology from us, as well as we are taking care of the civil security for roughly around 1 billion people on the globe. So we do have an impact, and the way we are trying, and we try to visualize all the data we capture in all its various aspects. So I have to say, I'm really looking forward to the discussion and the questions that hopefully will come during this hour.
Fantastic, and I'm sure they will. And I begin to see people saying hello in the chat box. Please keep that coming. I'm always fascinated from people around the world who are listening in as well. So please carry on with that. And then, last but not least, Sam. Sam,
hello, everyone.
welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sam Neblett. I am an XR architect, senior software developer and 3D modeler at Boeing Research and Technology. At Boeing, I work with game engines like Unity, Unreal, and various CAD packages and polygonal modeling suites to develop AR and VR applications for just a bunch of different platforms across the product lifecycle. And outside of Boeing, I'm the co-chair for the Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance area research committee. And then outside of that, I'm an indie game developer involved in various XR communities in my spare time. And then I've got over 11 years industry experience in the fields of XR, immersive technology, gaming, aerospace simulation, and defense training. And just like everyone else, I'm excited for all the questions to come in, and hopefully we can have a great conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. And thank you, everybody. As I've mentioned at the start, what I really like, one, all these companies are area members, which is fantastic. But two, the kind of diversity in terms of what you do. But also, I'm suspecting, but maybe not, your views on the metaverse. You know, when you're coming from a kind of a company that's deploying the technology versus a software integrator, hardware provider, kind of really interesting. That's why I like the diverse set of views that I'm sure we're going to get. Okay, well, let's get going with probably the tricky question. Okay, and you know, let's get started on, you know, what is the industrial metaverse and why is it important? What I'd like to do is come to Annika first as well to get your views, please. If you could start on what you think. Annika, can you hear me?
Yes, I hope you can hear me, because I have kind of a bad connection right now, but
Very good. So
can
just
you hear me?
yes, I can hear you. I was just asking the kind of kickoff question, really. Yeah, what is, in your eyes, the industrial metaverse, and why is it important?
So the industrial metaverse is not only just a virtual place, it's a virtual world which is connected to the real world, and that makes it quite challenging. But it helps us to really solve real world problems in a virtual environment, and that is what it's all about, the industrial metaverse. And therefore you need different things. First of all, it's immersion. So you really kind of have to feel like you're really in this place. That is the difference between simulation today and the industrial metaverse in the future, that you have really photorealistic application of the real world. And I'm not sure whether you can show the slide, which kind of makes it a little bit more tangible maybe. So you can see on the left hand side the simulation as it is today, and on the right hand side the photorealistic application, which describes very well, I believe, what it meant to be realistic. Then second, I think it's important that the metaverse is really yes, without the yes, thanks, is possible to have real-time collaboration so that everyone could be at the same time in this environment, and then you can test out different things and go around this, for example, the factory, but you can also have an industrial metaverse from buildings or trains or whatever. Then what we want to do with the metaverse is really predict the future and also go back in time. And that helps us to detect the failures, but also predict the future. And therefore, it's very important that everything is open so that you can connect different simulations from the engineering phase and design phase really to operations. So that's kind of a challenge for the metaverse. And of course, everything has to be secure because it's all about exchanging data between the real and the digital world. And therefore, it's important to have a trusted environment.
Okay, fantastic. That's a great view. Maybe to add to that, and we can start to compare and contrast. Hendrik, if I could maybe get your views on what you believe the industrial metaverse is.
Sure. I actually would agree with Annika. It's one perspective, though, from my perspective. And you know, for me, certainly the metaverse is a lot around immersion. But I also tend to do a slightly different perspective on this, which has a less immersive element in it, because I do believe that the industrial metaverse is really, you could maybe even say, significantly more powerful than the classical metaverse, where it's a lot around, you know, immersion. For me, it's about the industrial metaverse. If you do it right, it's about the perfect blend, I would even say, between a digital world and the real world, right? Those things coming together, blending digital information into reality. I think that is, for me, one of the key elements of the industrial metaverse. And what's also important for me is, while I absolutely agree with Annika, it is a lot about digital twins, data, about, you know, production processes, design and development and optimization. But it can also do great things on shop floors, where, you know, the frontline workers are really involved, where the reality is that they have to have their hands free, work on physical things, for example, manufacturing certain machines or engines. I think there the metaverse is really all about, you know, the perfect blend, like I just said. But you could also even take a perspective saying, you know, why should I care? So why should enterprises think about deploying something like metaverse technology? And for me, you could put it, let's say, in quotes, it is about, it's an opportunity to optimize human work, if you will, on the shop floors, right? I will leave it like that and give the others room for taking the same or different perspective.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm going to jump over to Rune, but I'm going to ask a bit of a difficult question, and feel free, everybody, to add to this as well. But, you know, if there hadn't been some companies changing their names recently and stuff like that, would we have been in this calling it the metaverse? Rune, what's your view, and is this just a term?
I'll say I'll go back a little bit before the metaverse, and I'll say basically from my perspective, we are looking at, I'll say it's a 3D version of internet in all its variants and flavors, as you would be looking at. Because if we look back at the, I'll say, the mid 90s, end 90s, when internet was coming around, we had really no idea what impact internet would have. And I think we are a bit there where, with the metaverse term as well, we are now kind of coined the term. We now need to fill it with some real content. And from Hexagon's perspective, we are looking at this in terms of, we say that, I'll say, our corner of the metaverse is the smart digital reality. In terms of how do we actually capture the real world? How do we model it? How do we interact with it and drive that aspect? And that can be very immersed, or it can be also very physical in its aspect. So in many ways, we are looking at what's called the birth of a new area, because so many different technologies are coming together. So we are moving away from call it the prototyping, to start doing real products and solutions. So of what is coming together, you got the hardware elements with all kinds of variables coming there, glasses, I'll say HMDs, you got contact lenses soon on the market that will display information, speech recognition, gesture controls that will actually function and work okay in industrial environments, and so on. But the thing that I think we tend to forget a little bit is that more than 90% of all information created that we have in our records in all this aspect has a geophysical location attached to it. So if we can utilize and use all that information actually where it belongs in the physical world, being virtual or not, then I think would be what really makes the change of all of that going forward. So it's a little bit different view from, as they call it, the Meta Zuckerberg's thinking or view on the immersion. And it's quite interesting also to follow the discussions between, for instance, Nuantech's approach on the metaverse and others in terms of how immerse or the combined, I'll say, with one joke that we do about actual reality, which is also one where we are on this.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ring. Sam, let me come over to your good self and your views.
Sure. So as with everyone else, I certainly agree with what's been said so far. And it's probably pretty clear that there's not really a concise definition so far for the metaverse and the industrial metaverse, how companies can utilize the metaverse. But I think at a high level, I mean, obviously it's an interconnected world, but it's similar to the internet and the Web 2.0 that was a push a while ago. And then now, of course, we're looking at a Web 3.0 push. And that it's heavily emphasizes user-generated content, especially within areas where you're trying to gain general information, or in industry case, sensor data from different machinery, flight logs. I work at Boeing, so different aspects of aircraft, telemetry data from stuff like spacecraft. But it also can utilize things like virtual avatars in meetings and voice chat to give users a feeling of presence. And while that might not seem super useful for a lot of people, it is pretty useful when dealing with geographic issues. So I know Boeing has a lot of offices around the world, as does Hexagon, Siemens, TeamViewer, I'm sure as well. And I mean, during the pandemic, we saw everyone starting to hire remotely. A lot of people are moving back to the offices. A lot of people are still staying remote as well. And we're using things like Zoom, like we're using right now. WebEx, a lot of companies are using TeamViewer, of course. We have TeamViewer over here. And the industrial metaverse kind of, as a concept, can encompass all of these things. And just like I said, apart from the human connection aspect, visualization just being a huge benefit, looking at to-scale engineering models during the design phase and then the training phase, utilizing those two-scale models and bringing people together in a similar environment to where they would be in the case of as an example, training in an environment where they would be training on these objects. And then I also wanted to add, why should companies care? Obviously, we have the geographic aspect that I mentioned, dealing with two-scale objects. That's a huge thing too. But also, this is happening in the consumer space, whether businesses stuck in the past like it or not. We've got a lot of younger, aspiring engineers, technicians, and executives growing up with these technologies, with VR headsets, augmented reality, and playing games in the metaverse. And businesses really do need to take note.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. June, coming over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Really good perspectives, guys. I liked many of the components and aspects of other guest speakers talking about. So from my humble view, I'm going to build upon some of the folks' kind of comments. Yes, to me, I envision, because I think this is like the metaverse still in early stage, right? We think envisioning like autonomous drive. You have different layers. Where we're going, I envisioning at the end of the day, there is only one world. In this world, there's real world, there's digital world, but people is part of people's life. people do not distinguish, am I in the digital world or am I in the real world? Because we are in one world that's all blended together. And a lot of time, put my kind of business heads on, I always say, hey, so, and the product management heads on, say, hey, then what's the benefits for that? What are we really doing, chasing all this stuff? To me, is what's the outcome we're looking for? Are we in an immersion business or hardware business, or are we in a business or task that empower and enable and unleash the powers of everyone in the world? So enable them to do the things they want to do. From Rocky perspective and my perspective, I believe we're in a much bigger business. So we are driving, leave nobody behind and empower everyone to do what they want to do. To me, come to me as the 4 R's: the right time, the right person with the right information and tools, get it what they want to do the right way and the first time every time. To me, that's my envisioning of the metaverse, the definition or not, but that's where I think the whole world could go and can go. So
fantastic. Well, I've been listening to that with fascination, and to be honest, looking at some of the comments coming through the chat box as well, which is really really interesting. And I've just jotted down a whole bunch of things from immersion, content, visualization, the augmented human, digital twins, connected world, internet 3.0, user generated content, sensor, presence, training, and it goes on. So I think it's almost one of those where you can play buzzword bingo and put it on a kind of a list and stuff like that, which is fine. And I think we are developing it, but I'd like to kind of quite quickly go on to the next question, because actually at the end of the day, and we're in this industrial space, we are about solving business problems. Yeah. Regardless of this technology, how cool it is, and different people come up with different things, businesses need to solve problems. So that's what I'd like to ask the next question. Let's get down into a little bit more detail, and maybe start with Hendrik. Is, what problems can or is the metaverse solving now or in the future? And again, how do people get started? Hendrik, would you?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Mark. First of all, I would say it can solve a lot of problems, the metaverse, if applied in the right way. I think Sam already touched on a couple of use cases that we frequently see out there. But let me try and summarize it a little bit. I'd say, there is use cases for the metaverse really along the entire industrial value chain, right? Along all the value chain processes. There is use cases that can be found in, for example, the supply chain logistics space. There is use cases, obviously, in the manufacturing space. I think we're talking a lot about manufacturing type of use cases, be it digital twin-like things that we already touched on, but also, assembly line kind of activities. All of these things are there. Certainly, quality assurance for me is a big area for the metaverse. Then there is certainly training. I think there's a lot. I mean, there are forms that are more immersive, others that are less immersive, where it can do great things with the metaverse type of technology. Then certainly, maintenance inspection type of use cases where it's kind of like as simple as step-by-step instructions, I would say. But all these typical activities have in common that they typically require quite some data so that the human can actually perform those activities. I think there is usually the strengths of the metaverse when it really comes to, rather complex processes. And then I'd say last but not least, Sam already mentioned, due to a pandemic, I think certainly remote support type of scenarios are a big chunk of the business today. And that's probably also maybe tied to the question, how can you get started, right? As an organization, how do you get started? Looking back, I'd say a lot of companies have started with a rather simple use case, which I would consider the remote support case to be, right? It has a fairly straight business case to calculate, right? You don't have to travel in order to fix things. So there, obviously, the power of the metaverse and the whole use case becomes, visible. But we're seeing more and more organizations actually rapidly expanding into other use cases, and in expanding actually into use cases that are more integrated in nature, that are more integrated, for example, with backend systems, right? That are not only loosely coupled, which may come at the downside of not being able to deploy, let's say, overnight, like remote support, you can certainly do, but the business value is significantly higher on average, I'd say, when I look at our customer base and the experiences and feedback that we're getting back. So how to get started? I mean, to sum up, I'd say certainly make sure you set your organization KPIs, really go in with targets. What do you want to achieve? And then I always go with the recommendation, don't pick the hardest problem to crack. Go rather simple in, and then learn and get better over time, but not pick the hardest nut and then you end up in a nightmare eventually. I think that would be something from my point, and then I pause here and let the others comment.
And again, I think a great point, Henrik. And certainly within the area, we talk a lot about planning big in terms of incorporating different parts of the organization. I'm thinking here like security and safety, but then kind of implement and deliver small. Gets your kind of pilots and proof of concepts going. Anyway, Bruno, over to you.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Henrik has said, but to add to that, it's a little bit, sometimes when I'm discussing the metaverse or extended reality technologies around this, it feels a little bit like there is, well, we have some tech looking for a problem to solve sometimes. And that is a little bit challenging because a lot of the things that we are working on is such a wow factor that people get blown away by the technology and forget to focus on actually what brings value. So I think that the real problem, so we've been doing a couple of industrial applications, one that's quite interesting, and that's what we call smart HVAC, where you're looking at HVAC simulations, airflow simulations in buildings, clean laboratories and so on, and you're actually then using AR devices on site to get a better understanding of dust problems, also the heating changes, how the airflow is going. We're doing similar things also with with solar power plants. We do the simulations and we actually go out in the field to see how the simulations matches what the reality, and using that as technology. So we've been trying to focus and figure out, okay, what brings actually value in terms of deploying technology of this type. So that's where, how I call it, our biggest starting point. Another element which is quite interesting is to see how can we use now and develop what we call AR tables, where we do storytelling on exhibitions and so on, and that has turned out to be very effective use of technology, and also to educate what you can do with technologies of this kind. So as a sample, for those that should happen to be in Munich, there's a massive AR table at the Bauma exhibition that goes on this week, and Bauma is the world's largest heavy construction expo. So if you're in Munich, drop by Bauma and seek out the stand, and you'll get a feel for what how we can use XR technology or AR stuff to really tell stories.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rune. Some great insights as well. Sam, over to you, good self.
Sure. So problems and use cases, the metaverse and XR as well in general can be utilized, obviously, with everyone here on the call in numerous different industries and a ton of different ways. But I mean, obviously not all use cases make sense in the metaverse or with XR. So it's crucial to narrow down a solid use case where metaverse or XR can be of benefit. And then the metaverse and XR, like I said earlier, can be used throughout the product lifecycle in planning, engineering, training, production, support. For me, some of the most impactful use cases that I've seen have involved training, particularly in complex tasks where significant training is required. And then remote inspection as well, that's a huge one, production guidance on shop floors and course, flashy visual sales visualizations as well. And then how do you get started? So like I think Rune said earlier, instead of just throwing technology in an attempt to keep up with new tech trends, businesses first really need to understand what the concept of the metaverse and XR is, and then how it can relate to their industry or similar industries. And then to do this, to properly understand what's possible with these technologies and concepts, I mean, I encourage people to look at, to attend industry events, see how related companies are using the technology, and then think about where it can be applied to what their day-to-day business is. And then once you have a good understanding of what's possible, you can start looking at problems or areas where improvement is needed within your industry. And then look to the metaverse and similar concepts of just how these technologies could ease current problems and bring your company closer together. And the Area Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance has outlined an awesome framework for this called the Enterprise AR Use Case Development Framework. So I encourage everyone to check that out if you get a chance. It has a use case template where companies can help clarify clear benefits and requirements, risk, personas, assets needed. And you can use that, bring it to leadership, and help clarify a good use case.
Fantastic, thank you, Sam. And I put that link from the area in the chat box as well. June, we're over to you.
Sure. Yeah, good discussion, guys. So from my observation experience, we've been deploying thousands of use cases globally with our partners and customers. I agree there are really three areas that we see to begin with, right? Remote assistance, guided workflow, sometimes even leverage AI, and whatever technology driving autonomous to a certain extent. And last but not least, see a little bit more sophisticated and the customers starting really tapping to transforming from a 2D world into a 3D world. I think and Dr. Annika mentioned digital twins. That's some of the high profile, truly like a breakthrough solutions that we are deploying with our customers, with our technology and our partners. And to me, how we start, it always started with a business problem. Some of the guys mentioned that, what are the pain points? But then to me is, okay, so what's the current state? What's the future state? How winning could look like and should look like? Then we talk about whatever technology we can use, right? I mean, I learned in my past life is if a technology or technologies can solve business problems, guys, it's way too easy. It's always boiled down to two things, right? One is people. In the end of the day, it's change management. The second is numbers. What is the ROI? In the end of the day, we have seen our customers being successful leverage some of these AR, XR, MR, whatever the metaverse terminology, leveraging some technology and solution driving less downtime, improve people's safety, right? There's a big dollars associated with that. And also really driving better collaboration. I think Sam was very, focused on those aspects. They're truly a synergy from helping people connecting better perspective too. A lot of times soft savings or soft ROIs, but put them together, there will be very, very concrete ROIs. And we all needed the storytelling. I like Ruin's mentioned storytelling approach to really create alignment within the organization, among the functions, and with external solution providers. Then we can go together, right? That's our kind of solutions. Then we can go together and stay focused, starting small. One area, two areas. You're not gonna eat the whole elephant in 6 months. Have some early wins, proof of concept. Then we go from there and can expand upon. So a lot of end customer internally, everybody has a boss. You need to say that. So I think the ROI is a good formula here. So that's my 2 cents.
Fantastic, great as well. Annika, apology, it seems like a while since we last heard from you. So, and I know, but please, your kind of thoughts on the problems that are being solved.
Yeah, so talking to Henrik, he said along the value chain, you have a lot of use cases. I would also say that along the life cycle of a product, you have a lot of use cases. So starting with design and engineering, the industrial metaverse will definitely help because it's able to bring different stakeholders to the table, even if they are non-technical stakeholders. So that means that you can involve the customer from a very early stage and therefore design really the product they need. For example, if you think just about a train, for example, that he can already walk through that train before it's even built and can maybe think about the seating and so on. Then secondly, I would say testing and validation is an important use case, which is enabled by the metaverse, because you can really test things in a virtual environment before you have to build them and put them in the real environment. So for example, if you think about AGVs, so automated guided vehicles, to really test them and validate that they run smoothly through the factory, it's good to have a virtual application from your factory side, and then you can let them autonomously drive through that factory. And then I would say virtual commissioning as a third important use case. So you can then also test, of course, install and test new devices and so on. That makes it much easier if it's pre-tested in a virtual industrial metaverse. And finally, along the life cycle, it's of course the operation side, and there it's for us very interesting if you talk about, for example, manufacturing, what will happen in the future. So I can test things, simulate what is going on then, and improve my operations, make it much more efficient, for example. So in general, how to start everything I just mentioned, this needs a lot of technology, what we already have, be it digital twins, be it simulation, be it artificial intelligence, the connection between the real and the digital world to get the data you need to build up the industrial metaverse. So I would say, of course, think about the use case, but then just start, because there's so much technology already available, which helps us to build this industrial metaverse.
Amazing, thank you. And just I'm just going to pop in the chat box here. You know, the area, and Sam's already provided some of the resources we give, but we've actually spent a lot of time with the area members defining some use cases. Okay, so they are, I think the interesting part is that they're distinct use cases as we've defined them. Quite often when it comes to solving business problems, it's a combination of these use cases, but it's a great piece of resource to people to have a look at. Great. Okay, now just for everybody, we've got about 20 minutes left, so we've got 2 questions, so we're going to have to do a little bit of a hurry up, but I think it's important, and I'd like to answer some of the questions as well. So we're going to have to rock and roll a little bit, but this is an important part in my eyes, and certainly the work we're doing in the area. It's about the benefits that our companies are getting or potentially will get from the metaverse as well. So I like to call this little bit "Show me the money." And again, with the time in mind, Rune, if I can start with you, some of your high-level thoughts of what you're actually seeing and you can potentially see in terms of ROI and benefits.
Yeah, we actually have customers that have a little bit the opposite thinking. Where they are saying we go digital first, and then we build a physical twin of massive process plants. That creates, I'll say, that gives you the starting point also in terms of how do you actually drive and get the real benefits out of it, because it requires actually call it a structural change in the thinking of a lot of top management to really get the benefits out of it. But where we see, for instance, other areas where Hexagon is working is in looking to civil infrastructure. One of the challenges you have in that area these days is more than 25% of the people working in the field will be retiring within the next 3 to 5 years. How do we capture the competence and build that from a personal competence in the field to an organizational competence that can be taken care of and be passed over to the next generation that's going to come in and do the work? So it is a little bit this, I was capturing the knowledge of knowing where to kick on the TV in the old days when you have these big boxes that were standing there, not flat screens. to make that working. So there are still a bit hard to say what are all the benefits that we can get, but these are some that we see, at least, because we are at a very early stage.
Perfect. Thanks, Rune, for some great answers there. Sam.
Sure. So benefits. So a huge one that I often mention is improved training. I think I've said it a couple times during this call. But just giving users the ability to train on hardware that hasn't been built yet, it can significantly reduce downtime caused by waiting for those physical builds to be built, of course, so you could then train technicians on them. There's a great VR training program I worked on at NASA called Vector, VECTR. That enabled technicians to train on a variety of environments on hardware that just hasn't been built yet, and then which in turn helped inform engineers and designs of what problems they may encounter, and then reduce downtime for those technicians because they didn't need to hold up or hurry up and wait just for the stuff to get built. Then for Boeing, one area that Boeing is publicly involved in is factory installation and their use of augmented reality for electrical wire installations. So we've developed applications that enable technicians on the factory floor to visualize complex wire installations overlaid on top of aircrafts, telling technicians exactly where they need to route and install wires. And prior to this, the alternative was really just give technicians 2D drawings to interpret. And sometimes these printouts can be 20 feet long. Just remember it, walk over to the aircraft and then install it. With using augmented reality, they could just overlay it right on top. And of course, we've got collaborative real-time design, and then just general familiarization that just for brevity, I won't get too far into. Yeah. That's it.
Sorry, Sam, come off hold then, a couple of things. And that's great. I think, guys, I'm seeing some kind of questions and things like that go into the chat box. I really ask if you can put them into the Q&A part, because we'll make sure if we can't answer them today, we'll follow up on them as well. So just a heads up on that. June, coming over to you.
Right. So let me just build upon what Sam's mentioned about one aspect, right? Training for sure. You significantly increase the kind of learning, reduce the learning curve. Sorry. For the workers to get onto the front line. So what we have seen, I'll give two very specific examples. One is related to, I mentioned like a guided workflow, right? Leverage digital twins, diagram, whatever, step-by-step guiding through AR, mixed reality technology, hardware and the software can, to me, the keyword is quality. First time fixed rate, it's first time assembly accurate rate. So, and we all know in manufacturer space, a defect in terms of quality, regardless assembling or parts quality, costs millions of dollars. That's where the money is going to come from. And so we have deployed with a global small appliance manufacturers. That's the first use case we deployed with them in about 27 manufacturers globally. That's exactly what they do. Leverage our hardware and some of the software solutions. Their workers, it's in that labor force, it's also high turnover, right? So that's what driving a better consistent execution on the assembly, and that's the use case, and that's a lot of money, millions of dollars associated. The other very legit use case I would quickly go through is in the oil, gas, kind of heavy industry. So imagine all those upstream drilling offshore platform. If one of the drill is down, that's millions of dollars a day. To fly a helicopter chopper to on the platform, not about the time lost, just the helicopter cost alone is 20K to begin with, not mentioning the engineer's time, this and that. That's millions of dollars if they done a day, 2 days, 3 days. With the remote assistance, with the right AR technology, with explosion proof, that's the $1 million going to come from. That's all not only top line, that's bottom line for all these big operations. Just want to share these two kind of very real use cases here. And that's show me the money. I actually made a speech in the field service, my past life. That's exactly my topic is show me the money. I deployed a GPS connected vehicle for driving field efficiency. So
fantastic. I did see you smile when I said it. So it's great. Annika, let me come over to you. to you as well.
Yes, I see three benefits. First is an enormous customer value because we enable the customer to be involved very early. We can test things in detail so that they will really have better products in the end. Then secondly, the speed. So we can definitely reduce the time to market. We can innovate more easily and progress faster. So I think that's also, of course, in the end, a benefit for our customers. And then third, we can reduce the consumption of material, consumption of energy if we are more efficient. And that in the end will help us also to be more sustainable because we have less material consumption. And I think that is very good for everyone.
Agreed, and it's a very good point. Hendrik, let's finish off the show you the money section with your good self.
Yeah, I think most has been said already. I would agree. Speed, quality, for sure, very, very important. I would like to add two more. Kind of the one is what I call flexibility. Given kind of usually those are wearable computing type of solutions. They tend to be more flexible for many organizations out there. They don't need to reconfigure kind of the reality to that extent, makes them way more flexible. And the last one I think is very important. I think we're obviously speaking a lot about customer value, and we basically mean obviously the guy that signs up for these projects gets a lot of value in return. So what's the ROI? But what about the people? What about the actual users, right? And I think there is good news actually, because what we're seeing is, as a result of deploying metaverse type of technology, you get happier employees on average, I'd say, right? I've been speaking to so many people telling me kind of, with this type of technology, or let's say support for my job, this is almost like the first time I ever had fun doing my job, because obviously we sometimes go with the metaverse technology target kind of the high value workers, right? Where it's, with significant complexity processes that they handle and all these things. But there's also the lower skilled workers, and they usually have been left behind by technology innovation, Industry 4.0 to quite some extent, I would argue. So, and they're really happy employees, I think is a significant benefit we should not neglect.
I agree. And thank you, everybody, because there's an amazing wide range of answers. I think focusing on some of the actual, clear ROI, but the human aspects as well. It's quite clear that for the future workers, they're going to want to be able to use this technology. And on Rune's point at the very start, the current workers, we need to capture their knowledge, but also lots of great things in between. One of my calls out to you as companies, but also to the attendees and things like that, we need more examples of benefits in the industry. We need more case studies. We need more people talking about this. So, the area is one channel, and you're more than welcome to speak to myself, but anything you can do to promote ROI helps the industry. It helps people understand. We're I think at the tip of the iceberg, in that there's some companies doing some amazing things with immersive technology, digital twins, the metaverse or whatever, but we basically don't talk about it enough. So please, my plea to you is keep doing your great work, but please talking about it. Okay, well, guys, I've got kind of 5 minutes, so I'm looking at some high level kind of bullet points here. We've had some great conversation about what is the metaverse, what problems are being solved, what the benefits are, but there are challenges. We know that with any new technology, it's often about how companies overcome and manage those problems. So from your experience, a couple of kind of key bullet points and things like that, so we can get onto the questions about some of the barriers you've either had to overcome or companies will have to overcome to successfully deploy the technology. So Sam, I'm going to start with you.
Sure, and I'll be quick with this. So probably the most common from my work barrier that I encounter is integration of just highly complex CAD models, and just how that results in slow performance in XR applications or web applications in the general metaverse. And this can be duplicate geometry and lack of communication on the CAD team, because they don't need to consider a lot of the constraints that we have for the metaverse for real-time applications. And then, so that often involves a lot of optimization of these 3D models. And then now the other issue with that is maintaining the digital thread. So once we do this optimization, how does it continuously get updated? So that's something that companies need to figure out. There's a bunch of different methods for it, but continuous integration is a big one. And then, of course, poor quality XR experiences. Make sure your XR content is good, runs well, and you don't turn people off in the future. So, because it sometimes can be hard to get people back once they've kind of been put off of it because of a bad app that they've used a few years ago.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam, for those insights. June, coming over to you.
Sure. Yeah. So from my perspective and experience, my observation, so I would say it's change management. It's people. You know, it's the classical, oh, it's fire, so it's gonna burn me because it's different, because we introduce a new way of doing things. You know, put my kind of Lean Six Sigma black belt hat on. That's reality. You know, it's but again, technology does not solve the business problem. It's the people leveraging technology to supposed to make things better, easier. So to me, it's just always cherishing the people side and elements. How do we pick the right pilot team? It's important. Demonstrate the early wins. It's important, and get the people who is more more ready to change, be the champion internally. That's critical too. So, and of course, you need a executive sponsor from any customer's perspective, right? You need somebody champion for you and help you clear up some of the internal hurdles. So my 2 cents.
Fantastic. No, that's some great insights. Thank you. Annika.
Yes, so I totally agree with Yoon on the change management side, because I believe there's not that one company who will build the metaverse. So we need many companies with many solutions, but in order to really build the one metaverse, we have to be open, and that is a huge change for industry. And second, we have to have interoperability. And I think that is also something where we have to change in terms of how do we develop our solutions, be it hardware, be it software, to really make it plug and play. So yes, it's change management, but not only the people using it, but also the people developing our hardware and software.
Excellent. Some great insights again. Thank you. Hendrik, over to you, Kasel.
I would agree. So certainly change management is the key thing here. I'd say also, I think you have to accept to take on some risk, right? When you go onto the metaverse journey, I think that is a matter of fact. I'd say overcome skepticism is a big thing for me. You have sometimes some negative thinking that you have to overcome in organizations. Sometimes, interestingly enough, it is coming quite from the C-level even sometimes, not really truly understanding, well, let's say what the problems on the shop floor actually are and look like and feel, and then jumping kind of almost to conclusions, because obviously it's risk, it's everything. So I think that is for me also one of the key challenges I would like to add. The rest I agree with.
Great, yeah, thank you. And Rune, to finish off this section.
Yeah, I think a little bit we can sum it up as like, this is what I call the CEO app problem. As you had at the beginning of the app area, they were running around saying, I need an app. And you asked, well, what's this app going to do? No, I need an app. No, what is it going to do? What's it going to solve? No, I need an app. And we have a bit the same thing ongoing on the AI side. And that is a bit back to what all of you have said in terms of what we need to overcome. But I think that change management and then figuring out what actually makes sense to do and where the value is, that is and also together with all the other good insights there and what we need to overcome. And not, as Sam also mentioned, the data problem, performance, because so many people have no idea what real-time rendering of bigger data actually means and what kind of constraints we have. So there's a lot of things.
Perfect. I agree. So listen, thank you, everybody. I just want to pick certainly one question and maybe two if we get a chance. I just, in the challenges, there's a couple I just want to also add. safety and the safety implementation, certainly of AR solutions, is something that needs to be considered. And we're doing a good job at looking at some of those challenges, and security as well. That needs to be thought through, and part of the initial part of implementing. Gosh, can't talk anymore. Implementing AI, you need to think about the safety part. So I've got one question, and I think it's really relevant to some of the bits we've got. It says for Sam, but I think anybody could add to it as well. Younger aspiring engineers or innovators in this space, will it take a generation to gain adoption with the older generation who are still in leadership roles, and how long do you think that's going to take? Great question, by the way, who asked that? Sam, thoughts?
I don't think so. That's a good question, and it's not the older generation I found isn't necessarily reluctant to adopt these newer technologies. A big issue that I've seen is they've tried to adopt these technologies. I touched on it briefly, but a big issue is they used a Google Cardboard app 4 years ago, and it was terrible. So they just don't want to try it again. And honestly, that's understandable, especially if you're at the C-level and you deal with risk management. You don't want to introduce these new technologies, especially if you're behind. So I think it's crucial that we try to create performant applications, don't give people a bad experience in XR or in the metaverse. And then that hopefully can drive change. You could drive it from the bottom up with people who are more willing to take risks, try these new technologies. But I definitely think there's hope. I don't think we need to wait a whole generation to adopt it.
Perfect. Annika, the last comment you see, you got your hands up.
Yeah, similar. So I believe that we don't have the metaverse or also the industrial metaverse tomorrow. So it will take some time. It's an evolvement of the existing technologies. And therefore, I believe, yes, it might take some time, but everybody is part of this journey. So I don't see a huge issue with that. I mean, if you compare it to the internet, it wasn't there from just the next day on, and now everyone is using it. So I don't see this as a huge challenge.
Fantastic. Okay, so it leaves me to thank you. Sorry, the questions will be answered. My apologies, it was such a great amount of comments and insights that we just didn't get to the questions, so my apologies, but I know there's lots, so thank you for those. We will answer them. The panelists have agreed to that. So thank you. Thank you again to the sponsors, Dark Pulse, GE Digital, Intel, Hitachi, Ventarara, Hersilio, and Siemens. Was amazing. Now going to hand over to the next session, which will be answering the question, will the industrial metaverse disrupt the global industry? Thank you very much again for all your insights.